Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a session on updates on the WSA initiatives impacting rural Saskatchewan with the Water Security Agency. My name is Adam Brome, and I am a Strategic Communications Advisor with SARM. A few items to note before we get started are the webinar will be recorded, and copies of the recording and presentation will be distributed by email to all attendees following the webinar. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation followed by a Q&A session where attendees can ask any questions regarding the subject matter that was presented. Please submit any questions that you have through the chat, and our presenters will respond once the presentation has concluded. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during today's webinar, please let us know through the chat and we will do our best to troubleshoot. And if you do experience any difficulties with your audio or video during the webinar, please first try logging out of the session and rejoining. This tends to help reset your device settings. Today's presenters join us from the Water Security Agency. Leah Clark is the Executive Director of Irrigation and Economic Development at the Water Security Agency. She has been a professional agrologist for 15 years and is excited about the opportunities in Saskatchewan. Krystal Tendler is the Executive Director of Agriculture Water Management, where she is responsible for drainage policy, approvals, and compliance. She farms with her husband and kids near Bendigo, Saskatchewan. And last but not least, Adam Matichuk is the Manager of Water and Wastewater, where he's responsible for overseeing 5 different regulatory programs, including serving as the program lead for the Aquatic Habitat Protection Permit Program. He lives in Regina with his wife and 2 children. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Leah, Krystal, and Adam for their presentation.
Thanks, Adam. I'm up first. So like Adam said, my name is Leah Clark. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be asked to do this presentation for SARM. And I think that if you or any of your municipalities or councils want further information on any one of these topics, we're more than willing and able to come and do specific discussions with you as requested. So don't hesitate to reach out. So we're going to talk about three main topic areas: irrigation, focusing on the Westside Irrigation Project, that's me. We'll also dive into ag water management and Aquatic Habitat Protection Program. So I'm starting with the Westside Irrigation Rehabilitation Project. I just kind of want to start off by saying Saskatchewan really does have a great irrigation story to tell, and this is merely just one of those stories. I'm often asked why irrigation matters, and I'm sorry if any of you have seen this slide before, but I think it's really impactful. The United Nations put this stat forward last year, and they said in the next 40 years the world needs to produce the equivalent of all the food produced in the last 10,000 years. And I know we probably have lots of producers here on the call today, and there has been lots of improvements in how we produce food and safe, reliable, quality food. But one of those things that really help to boost yield, as you can imagine, is applying water to those crops. And we really do, I hope to kind of show you guys through this presentation that we really do have an abundance of water in Saskatchewan and some opportunities for irrigation in the province. And Water Security Agency has a mandate to use water as a driver to support Saskatchewan's growth plan. And irrigation is one of the ways that we can do that. And so this is just a bar graph showing the irrigation developed per year from 2011 to 2024. And you can see, and I remember being in the Ministry of Agriculture, and when we hit 5,000 acres in 2016 of irrigation development that year, it was a big celebration. It was like, yay, we got 5,000 acres in 1 year. Then in 2020, the provincial government put out a growth plan target of 85,000 acres to increase development of irrigation to 85,000 acres by 2030. So that was a 20-year and at the 10-year stretch goal at the time. And what I hope you can all see here is that in 2022, we hit a really good year, almost hitting that 15,000 acres of development. But in 2023, we hit 24,000 acres of development. And this wasn't government, this is producers investing in irrigation around the province. 2024, we hit over 20,000 acres. And the soils work that we're doing this year is indicating that we're going to see another healthy year of irrigation development again in 2025, with some pivots already in this spring. So history of irrigation, lots of times we think about irrigation is just around Lake Diefenbaker, but I want you guys to know that there's been lots of irrigation in the province. In 1905, we had over 200 kilometers of irrigation canal, most of them in the southwest. But the creation of Lake Diefenbaker really did open up some opportunities for irrigation, some added opportunities for irrigation in the province. And that's where we are seeing most of the growth happen and most of the opportunity now. Not to say that there isn't opportunity around the province. So as an agrologist, and many of you, when you see that picture on the left and all that topsoil blowing around, it kind of makes you cringe. But the dirty 30s really did kind of lead the way to noting that we needed some water infrastructure here in Saskatchewan. It goes all the way back to John Palliser coming to Saskatchewan and reporting that Saskatchewan was ill-suited for human inhabitants. And so with the creation of Gardner Dam and the Qu'Appelle River Dam, this Lake Diefenbaker was created. So I think one of the things that I'm learning and that I didn't know was just how big Lake Diefenbaker truly is. So it's one of the largest untapped sources of water in all of Canada, 9.6 million dam cubed of water storage. It's 225 kilometers long, has 800 kilometers of shoreline. The surface area alone is 110,000 acres, and the maximum depth is 58 meters or 190 feet. It also supplies water to 60% of Saskatchewan's population. And I don't think a lot of people really realize that until they kind of dive into the Lake Diefenbaker and where the water is going and whatnot. There's a variety of canals that support water being transported to a number of different communities. WSA reviewed 88 years of flow data and found that with no significant change in operations, there's nearly 900,000 acre-feet per year of additional water available from Lake Diefenbaker. We often talk about the operating range of Lake Diefenbaker in meters. And so just to kind of drive it home just how much water there is in Lake Diefenbaker, 1 meter of water provides 300,000 individuals with water for 18 years. So it's just a huge amount of water in this lake. So to further kind of drive it home as to how much water is in this lake, and again, sorry if some of you have seen this before, but this is such an important slide when talking about Lake Diefenbaker and these irrigation projects to drive home the amount of water. So that bar graph there's the Saskatchewan bar graph for water storage. That's just Lake Diefenbaker. The Alberta bar right beside it, that's all Southern Alberta reservoir capacity, storage capacity altogether. So just our one reservoir, Lake Diefenbaker, compared to all of Southern Alberta reservoirs. So a huge amount of water storage capacity. When we look at irrigated acres, though, out of those same water storage, it's a very different story. So Saskatchewan, we actually are just hitting 165,000 acres of irrigation out of Lake Diefenbaker. And Alberta has they hit 1.6 million acres of irrigation from the reservoir capacity that you can see there. So just a very different story. And I hope it kind of drives home the opportunity that we do have in a sustainable way. One of the questions we get asked a lot is there enough water and will there be enough water in the future? So we have worked with a number of scientists and put together a bunch of different data. And I'll share with you how we can share that with everyone who's interested in a minute here. But so South Saskatchewan river flows are influenced by snowmelt in the mountains and rainfall. Most climate models suggest that there will be an increase in future water flows on the South Saskatchewan River. What those models are showing is that the timing becomes less predictable and the rainfall or precipitation amounts are less predictable. And apportionment agreements ensure that Saskatchewan gets our share of water. So we are, through our apportionment agreement from Alberta, we are to get 50% of natural flows from Alberta. The agreement doesn't stipulate when, but we are to get 50%. And now Alberta, we have great working relationships with Alberta. They always send their fair share. When I looked at the data from the last 10 years, we are hitting 60 to 70% of flows when they're to give us 50. Last year started off quite dry. They still gave us 56% of the water throughout the year. And then to put it in perspective, though, we send 97% to Manitoba when we have the same range, 50% of flows go to Manitoba. So again, just kind of driving home maybe some of the opportunity for water storage and strategic water use in Saskatchewan. So getting into the project here of the rehabilitation project, we did announce in 2020 a big 340,000 acre project. When we did the conceptual design and feasibility study, we realized that there was really one obvious project that made sense to move forward. And like your irrigation projects, you see that circle? That's the area that made sense. So the current project map that you see in front of you there is the current Westside Irrigation Rehabilitation Project that we are undertaking. It's a 100,000 acre irrigation expansion project. And it's making use, it's called the Rehabilitation Project because it's making use of existing infrastructure. And so the purple line on that map represents canal that's already developed and in use by Macrorie Irrigation District. The green line represents canal that was dug in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and abandoned, has never seen water. The proposed Conquest Reservoir there has one full dam embankment built, and the substructure of the pump station is already built. So when we say rehabilitation, we're rehabilitating some of those existing works. Now, because they've sat unused and because technologies and whatnot have changed, we're looking to do some pretty expansive rehabilitation work on these parts, but the footprint is there. And so for those of you that are kind of trying to orientate where this project would take place, I put a circle on this map here. So like I said, the canal construction was 95% complete. The pump station stopped with the substructure, and that larger north dam was created. And so you can see that Westside Main Canal coming out of that red circled area there. And if you look really closely, you can see that there's a marina right beside there as well from that new development. So that's where we're looking at. And here's just some pictures. So there's that substructure of the pump station. It has a little pump house on it. Macrorie Irrigation District uses that pump. And then you can see the canal forward from that pump station. And so what we're going to do is we're going to increase that canal capacity to 32 cubic meters per second. I put this picture in here because that's a photo of the east side canal, which is a 32 cubic meter per second canal, just so that we could all see what would be kind of expected in terms of size there and what a new canal looks like when it's rehabilitated. So that's that. So we'd have to minimize those project impacts, optimize the current kind of right away. We'd fully line it, rehabilitate those existing cross drains, and rehabilitate the canal itself, as well as kind of build that dam out. So where are we at? We just finished a 60% design contract. And when I say just finished, we're just reviewing the documents and the reports right now. The next stage will be 100% design and tender. And so we're looking at how to kind of scope out that next contract. One of the things that we've done to be proactive is we've self-declared this project as a development. So we're self-declaring it as a development so that we go through the environmental regulatory pathway with the Ministry of Environment. So we're working through that right now, meeting with them regularly. And as part of that process, the terms of reference and the environmental impact statement will be available publicly online. And so we're working towards that. We also have a longer presentation that a few of our team members have been giving out publicly. We have that available on our website as well. So I'll show you where that website is in the next, I think in 2 slides coming up here. But it's all available online, and we're trying to be very transparent with this project as it progresses. So lots of times we get asked, well, why irrigation? And we hear those comments of, it's only helping a few farmers. And I just wanted to take a moment just to kind of touch on the GDP creation of irrigation, because I think it's an important thing. So 1 acre of dryland wheat contributes $400 to provincial GDP. We all know that fluctuates. But 1 acre of irrigated vegetables, so change that wheat to vegetables, add some water, and we're starting to look at numbers like $5,000 to provincial GDP. 1 acre of processed vegetables contributes $20,000 to provincial GDP. And we see this in other jurisdictions, the industry that irrigation attracts. We do on our website have an economic analysis that we have completed. We're working on an additional economic analysis that's a little bit more robust on the industry attraction components of this project. But I also wanted to just point out some of the awesome industry that we've already attracted, because I don't think the whole province knows about this, and we should be kind of giving credit where credit is due here. So we have Wolf Willow Winery around Lake Diefenbaker there, grower and wine beverage producer. We have Spring Creek Gardens, 1,000-acre vegetable farm, plus 1,000 acres in potatoes. They just put up a huge processing facility and storage facility. We have 3,500 to 4,500 acres of potato production. So to put that in perspective, 125 million pounds of potatoes annually we produce. I saw a bunch of semis going the other day, was wondering where they were going. They were actually passing our farm, and it turns out it was from Sheldon Kennedy's farm. And like he mentioned that they were trucking out, to California, some seed potatoes. And he started talking about all these different places and connections. And it's just incredible that Saskatchewan's kind of known because we don't have any of the disease loads and whatnot. So lots of opportunity there. So as part of this project, and part of the reason why we're so thankful to be here today, is we really do want to hear from people of Saskatchewan about this project. And that's part of our approval process as well, is getting that feedback, positive, negative questions. And so we did put together a dedicated email address there, WSA Irrigation at wsask.ca. We also have a dedicated website address website. The QR code's there along with the address. And we are updating that as we go. So as soon as the terms of reference are made public, we anticipate in the next week or so, a link will be put on right onto this website so that people can look at the details of this project. But please don't hesitate to reach out. We have people monitoring this and reaching out and replying as we go. So with that, I'll hand it over to Krystal.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Leah. And we're going to roll in from talking about irrigation and how to make it rain to what happens when we have too much water. And so again, my name is Krystal Tendler. I'm responsible for agriculture water management at WSA. And we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of drainage, how to do it responsibly, and some of our new policy that's come out. And so just to, again, set the context of, that we talk about the dirty 30s and the many dry years, but we also know that there's a lot of water out there in the province of Saskatchewan. We're home to an abundance of lakes, rivers, and wetlands. So even in the southern part of the province, which is predominantly farmland, agriculture being our backbone, there's still 4.6 million acres of wetlands amongst that farmland. So that makes this challenge of managing agricultural water one that's top of mind for many people, many producers across the province. And that's why drainage has become an important tool in Saskatchewan farms. And it's not a new tool. It's something that we've been doing in this province for a long time. And if you look across Canada and internationally, it's kind of how land was settled. It was settled by really understanding how to manage the water that's there to make that land productive. And so if you look in the picture that I have here on the screen right now, that land would be challenging to farm. If you had an 8-foot drill and you're trying to get around it this time of year, you'd have some issues. And so drainage is used as a tool to move water, to improve efficiency, be able to get onto that land, get the crop in, and have improve that productivity and profitability. That also helps to lead to improved resiliency in the farm. If you know where your water is going to be and when it's going to be there, whether through irrigation or drainage, you have a more resilient farm to changes in weather and extremes. And all that comes together to provide benefits to the province as an economic driver. We've done some work around this, and we found that drainage can actually have about a 15 to 20% impact on farm cash receipts. But we also know that drainage needs to be done responsibly. So drainage, when done responsibly, can protect water quality and make sure that nutrients aren't running downstream. It can help prevent flooding and drought by controlling the flow of water, the speed of it, how much is moving and when. And it also can still provide habitat. So drainage isn't about destroying all habitat, taking all the water off the landscape. It's more about knowing, having kind of that control and management in place. So responsible drainage, what does that look like then? The main thing is that it needs to be coordinated and planned. It's not something I go out this afternoon and do without kind of some foresight. So I'm working with my neighbors to understand what happens between my land and the outlet typically being a lake or a creek. And so then you go from there and you design a project using kind of technical practices. Sometimes you need some engineering, but most of the time you just need some support, whether in the form of a qualified person or with working with WSA. Through that support, helping to design things to control flow. So again, whether it's a culvert or a drop structure, and manage for potential erosion. Nutrient management is also a consideration when we're talking about responsible drainage. So where can we be using for our nutrient practices to prevent those nutrients from entering the water and moving downstream? Healthy wetlands are also an important part of responsible drainage. So how can we ensure there's some wetlands staying on the landscape? Where there's those going to be and how can we protect them? And the final piece of a responsible drainage project is that it would receive a validation through WSA's drainage approval process. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So WSA's role in agricultural water management is to facilitate that responsible drainage in resilient watersheds. By doing that, our approach has been a network approach. We never consider one project in isolation of quarter section lines. We think of it in terms of that network. So from the drainage works that occur to the outlet. And so the picture that I included looks at that, looks at all the water within that, that kind of blue outline of a network. How is the water moving? What's being drained? What's being retained? All the different players, where we might need flow controls. And so that can happen just between landowners, or it can be formalized through a conservation and development area, or a C&D, as you'd probably more frequently hear it called. C&Ds are actually a type of municipal government where you form through order of the minister, and once you do that, you have the powers of expropriation, and you can levy the landowners within that area to use those funds for either construction of the projects or maintenance of the projects. So the C&D approach is typically used when you have a more complicated or more expensive project that you kind of need that cash flow for. If it's just the landowners who are working together to do a project, those can be just submitted through a joint application. You don't need to formalize those into that C&D. But regardless, you do need permission from all the landowners who will have the water cross their land. And that's a requirement set by British common law. Because essentially, your water, when it leaves your land, is trespassing on your neighbors as per this common law. And so it's just good practice anyways, that if you're working on a drainage project, that you're coordinating that with your downstream neighbors. So then what does the approval process look like? So the first piece is you contact us, or you contact the consultant called a qualified person. You'd work on that coordinated plan. You think about those mitigation requirements, those flow controls, erosion controls, put all those pieces in place. And now there's this new step in here, step number 3, and this is determine what wetlands would be retained. So not only are you thinking about what you're going to drain, you're also going to think about what you're going to retain. And this is in alignment with the new policy we have called the stewardship policy, and I'll just talk about that in 1 minute. The step 4 is you'll obtain permission from all those that you're coordinating with. Step 5, WSA would look at the application. And this WSA kind of approval process here that happens in step 5, we've committed to a 10-day turnaround time on those applications. And so once the application comes into us with all the signatures in place and the project designed appropriately, we can look at that pretty quickly. And then we can issue an approval or a permit with the term length of anywhere between 25 and 45 years, depending on the type of project it is. That approval actually gets registered on the land title. So if I did a project, that the approval gets registered on the land title of my quarter, and then if I was ever to sell the land, the title or the approval would transfer ownership along with the land. So it provides good security for that work you put in up front in developing the project. So I mentioned this new piece in there, step 3, about determining what wetlands need to be retained. And that comes from this new agricultural water stewardship policy. And this just came out in January. And so for those of you who might have been on a webinar about egg water management through SARM, maybe earlier this year or last fall, we would have been talking about how we were in the process of developing this policy. We've since launched the policy. And really what it is a reflection that wetlands have a really important place in the landscape. And we need to keep some of them out there, no matter how we're looking at egg water management. And so this new policy requires some level of retention as a part of all drainage projects. It has an average of about 11% of wetlands need to be retained on each project. And I caution to use averages because it absolutely does vary depending on where you are in the province, because it's a regional approach. We know that every area of the province is different, and the amount of wetlands we need to retain will vary depending on where it is. But really the intention behind this policy is to ensure that we're able to manage the cumulative impacts of drainage. If we lose one wetland, we can manage the increase in flows. If we lose all the wetlands, there's a lot of water moving and it becomes a bit difficult to manage. And so having that retention in a way that's practical and makes sense will provide that security. So the policy is just new in January, and so there's lots of new information available that we're happy to share, and our technicians are also available to support clients in navigating through that new policy. So the next piece I want to touch on is just what's RM's role in egg water management. As all of you are here are joining as members of an RM, there's a few different spots that RMs might play a part. The first and probably the most frequent thing that you're involved in is just managing those flows. And so an RM's responsibility is ensure that the natural flow of water is maintained. So as you're building roads or working on projects, infrastructure projects, your job is to ensure that the natural flows remain consistent. And so that typically means installing culverts. If you need to divert water beyond where maybe it would have naturally flown, then you need to work with us on some sort of approval for that diversion. We also have RMs who get involved in landowners' drainage projects if landowners' projects are going to involve RM infrastructure. So if I'm working on a project with my neighbors and it's eventually going to cross through an RM culvert, the RM would have to provide permission for that to happen, or if we're going to use an RM right away to move water. So RMs play a pretty active role in providing kind of oversight and permission for those projects. And finally, the third piece here is that RMs also obviously play a role when there's an emergency in those high flood year events. And you might have to construct particular works or do temporary pumping to manage those sudden inflows of water. The final piece here is what about those who are being impacted by drainage? We say drainage must be done responsibly to prevent those downstream impacts. But what if those are happening? And I can assure you that we know that there are situations like this out there, and we're here to support landowners in addressing those. And so the first piece is that if there's some drainage that's happening upstream and it's causing an impact to you or to RM infrastructure, try to work it out at the local level. Talk to the landowners, try and find a resolution. But if that doesn't work, reach out to us. We have a process called a request for assistance, which is actually a legislated process where we can support clients to find a resolution to these type of drainage projects or problems. We do require a $1,000 refundable filing fee up front. That is refunded right when we confirm that it is a drainage issue that's causing the problem. The reason for that filing fee is just to prevent concerns coming into this RFA process that don't meet that kind of definition of drainage that this is designed to solve. And so we're just finding it kind of became maybe a government complaint landing spot, and we're getting a whole bunch of wild stuff. And so the $1,000 fee helps sort through the chaff and ensure that real concerns are being addressed through here, and allows us to provide better service to those concerns that are coming in. And so if you file that RFA, there is then prescribed timelines to find resolution to these issues of 12 to 18 months. And so we deal with those throughout the year, obviously. And if you do think you have one that maybe fits the bill, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to work through it with you. Other way that we're able to help is through some funding programs. So 2 different programs that are available to RMs. The first is the Ag Water Management Fund. And this helps to address barriers that might be experienced by clients working towards a drainage approval. So that might be some of that technical support that's required, or some of the work that's need to be done around mitigation and rehabilitation of projects. The second program is the Channel Clearing and Drainage Maintenance Program, and it helps to manage those, whether they're constructed or natural channels, and clear debris and sediment, beaver dams from those water courses. So this is a very popular program that helps maintain whether it be, again, constructed or natural waterways. Finally, just want to mention that if you are interested in learning more about agricultural water management in Saskatchewan, we do have an online course. It's about 4 hours, but broken up into modules that you can take at your own pace. This program was just kind of recently relaunched on our website. It's called Ag H2 Onward. And it will kind of guide you through more information on the background of ag water management, how to get an approval, and different considerations along the way. So it's a really helpful program if you want to dive into this topic a little bit deeper. And with that wraps up what I wanted to share here today, but I will stick around for questions. But I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk about Aquatic Habitat Protection Program.
Thank you, Krystal. I probably have the least exciting topic to talk about today. However, I do have a few things of interest there, or a couple things that I think will really interest RMs here today. So most of you probably have had some interaction with our Aquatic Habitat Protection Program in the past. And so whether it was through you as the RM requiring a permit from us for some work that you're doing, or perhaps you're an RM with developments around a lake or something like that, where you've had to give permission, say, on a municipal or environmental reserve for lands. And so what I want to do is just give you a quick overview of the program and a little bit about the aquatic habitat protection permits, but also talk about our new environmental protection plans that we think can be of real benefit to you. So I guess to start with, why do we have the program? Is it just another permit process? What's the point of it? And so we know that people need to do work in and around water, whether it's building a road crossing, installing a culvert like in the photo here, or perhaps somebody wants to build a cottage or a boat launch or something like that. When this work occurs, it can have a negative impact on those ecosystems. And what we can see over time is these little impacts can add up to be a really big impact, or really negatively impact those ecosystems. They're very sensitive, and so it could result in things like lower fish populations or poorer water quality, more algae growth. And so really what we're trying to do is manage these little impacts so they don't have serious negative implications on these ecosystems in the long run. And so there's a number of ways that we try to minimize those impacts. I often call it a death by 1,000 cuts. How can we do that? So we focus on minimizing things like adverse effects to water quality. So this could be something from, an oil spill or fuel spill from a machine. Another really big one that people don't realize can have a significant negative effect is erosion of soil, and then the deposition of that soil in the water course or in the lake. And so we really do try to take a lot of steps to prevent that from happening. Because that and other things, just even the physical loss or alteration of that habitat, can result in impacts to the species that live there. And lastly, we want to minimize that impairment of vegetation or those animal species. So we want to keep those ecosystems really healthy. So that's really the purpose of our program. Is we know that this work has to occur. We're not here to stand in the way of it. We just want to make sure that when it's done in the best way possible, so it has as little negative impact on those ecosystems as possible. And so we do this through a tool we call the Aquatic Habitat Protection Permit, or sometimes AHIP for short. Under the legislation we work with, it defines where an AHIP is required, and it's required anytime there's going to be work within the bed, bank, or boundary of a water course or water body. So those are really important and define for us the area that we focus on. So the bed is the bottom of the lake or the water course that's covered by water. Now, it doesn't have to be covered all the time. We do have a lot of streams and lakes and wetlands that dry up in this province. Maybe water only flows there for a few weeks in the year, but it's still considered a water course, and that's still the bed. The bank is the rising ground that confines that water to the water course or the lake. And the boundary is the riparian area, which is that transition zone between the aquatic habitat and the upland habitat. So often you see, different grass species, sedges, things like that, willows growing in that area. They can tolerate that waterlogged soil. And so basically, anytime you're doing any work within that area, you require a permit. So for activities that result in altering the bed bank or boundary, removing, adding, or moving sand, gravel, or other materials, or removing vegetation, and that's from within the water or on the land, or the shoreline in that boundary area. So every time we issue an aquatic habitat protection permit, it describes the work that you propose to do, so that we understand, we both have a common understanding of what's going on, and it allows us to anticipate what some of the impacts might be. So each permit has conditions that are intended to mitigate those impacts. So they'll have conditions, for example, about keeping machinery out of the water, or or how you should refuel it. The conditions about installing erosion or sediment control measures, like in this photo, that make sure that the site is restored and vegetation grows there again, so that there isn't a constant erosion of soil from the site, and which is depositing in the water. And these conditions are really important because that's what's protecting those ecosystems from those impacts, and so they must be followed. So that's always something we want to tell people. They're there for a reason, and it's our expectation that they're followed as best as you can. And so we are happy to work with people to explain those conditions and determine other ways to do work that can minimize that impact, to allow you to get that work done. We also remind people that each one of these permits is reviewed, or each application is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. It's because we need to make sure we understand the site, the work that's going on, and those potential impacts. So it does take time to review each permit, and so we ask people to apply early, because it could take up to 45 business days to get the permit. On average, we deal with about 1,000 permits every year, so it's a lot for just a handful of specialists to review. But it's really helpful when we have good information, site photos, all of that kind of stuff to support the application. Again, it's important to note that this is an environmental permit. It is intended to mitigate those impacts from those work activities. So that's why the permit's required before the work starts. There's no point in getting the permit when the work is halfway done or after the work, because the conditions in there aren't going to help you minimize those impacts. So it's really important that this is done ahead of time. It's also important to note that the Aquatic Habitat Protection Permit is not a development permit. WSA isn't really determining what type of building or activity can go on in an area. So for example, I like to use boathouses as an example. So there may be a cottage owner who wishes to build a boathouse along the shoreline. It is really up to the municipality to decide whether boathouses are something they allow in their, a type of development they allow within their municipality. WSA doesn't decide whether or not there should be boathouses there. We're looking at it to say, okay, if you're going to build a boathouse, here's how you should do it so you don't have an impact on the lake. So that's really our role, and there's a little bit of a distinction there. So those development activities, the development permits, still remain with the municipality. And also, we like to remind people that just because you get our permit doesn't mean you don't require other permits or approvals. So for example, you may require, a cottage owner may require a development permit from the RM before they build that boathouse. Other activities, if you're putting in culverts that may impact fish passage, for example, you may require an approval through the federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So just because you get our permit doesn't mean it releases you from the responsibility of getting all the other permits and approvals that you may require. So we know, as I mentioned a couple slides ago, that it can be really challenging sometimes to apply for a permit in enough time and get the permit and go ahead with the work. And so that 45 business days can be quite challenging. And often if you're applying in the winter, we see a lower number of applications, and that work because there's less work going on, and we're able to get those out a lot quicker to clients. However, once we get into this time of year, the spring, summer, fall, when construction's happening and people are trying to get everything done and cottagers are at the lake, it takes more time to get a permit out. So we know that there are a lot of low risk activities that are going on out there. And as a way to try and just push those through so that it doesn't require as much administration work, but still maintain the environmental standard that we have out there, we've developed these new tools that we're calling environmental protection plans. And so WSA has developed a few of these already. And each one, it's in a sense, it's like a pre-written permit. It outlines the scope of work that's allowed under that EPP and the conditions that the clients must follow when they're doing the work. And so the difference here, though, is as long as you can follow that scope and those conditions, you don't need to submit an AHIP application. You can instead submit a one-page notification form, which just outlines who you are, where you're working, and the type of work that you're doing. The nice thing about this is it really reduces turnaround times for clients, particularly on these low-risk EPP scenarios. And so you can decide, you know what, I'm going to do some shoreline stabilization work at my cottage tomorrow, and I haven't applied for a permit, but I can fit within this EPP. I can send in the notification today and start tomorrow. You can start immediately once the notification form is submitted. So, as I mentioned, we have a few EPPs that we've already developed for certain activities. The first one was related to shoreline stabilization. It is primarily geared toward cottage owners who are doing, maybe need to add a little rock riprap to their shoreline, maybe some minor resloping work on the shoreline to stabilize it where there's been some erosion. The second one we released just in November, the past year here, was the Bridge Maintenance, Repair and Replacement EPP. And this one is geared more toward municipalities and the Ministry of Highways, where they need to take on some of those sort of routine bridge works that come up from time to time. This allows most work to occur that we see, but there are a few restrictions or a few things that aren't allowed. And so I just had a look this morning, and we've had a number of RMs already in the last 4 or 5 months, 6 months, take advantage of this bridge EPP. So I thought this is one that might be of real interest to you. The most recent one we released is the irrigation intake and pump station. This one is geared to irrigators, producers who are looking to install intakes and pump stations. It's primarily for lower risk activities, so things that require installation of cofferdams and things like that are considered higher risk and not included in this, but it does allow some of those smaller systems to take place under this EPP. We also have another one coming here in probably a couple months. It should be out this summer, is for water intake maintenance and dredging. So once you've installed that irrigation intake and after a few years it silts in, you might need to clear out the intake area with an excavator. That's what the water intake maintenance dredging will be for. But it's also for things like golf courses, municipal water intakes, and anything like that. So how can you benefit? As I mentioned earlier, I think the main one that RMs will use at this point is for bridge maintenance, repair, or replacement. The nice thing about this is either you or your consultant, whoever you're working with on this contractor, can simply send in the notification as long as you can meet those eligibility requirements for that project. The nice thing about it is it really shortens those turnaround times. You can start right away with this. the other added benefit to this for us and for you is that with shortened turnaround times, we spend less time looking at these lower risk permits applications, and we can spend more time and get out some of the higher risk permits a lot quicker to you or to any other clients that are doing work around water. Again, with these EPPs, because they have a standard set of eligibility and conditions that go along with them, it provides some predictability for contractors and consultants or anybody using them, really, because you know what to expect. You know what's required of you every time. And in some ways, you can even design your project to meet those requirements, just to minimize the time it takes to get the permits. Just a few other things I think that are important to know about them is that there is a requirement to submit photos with the notification. So we want to know what the site looks like before you start any work, so that we can assess that. But down the road, if there are any concerns with how the work is done or we receive a complaint, we can evaluate it based on those photos as well. Just like the permit, the EPP conditions must be followed. They're no good and they don't protect the environment if they're not followed. So I just want to point out that there's a requirement to follow them there as well. And like permits, other approvals may be required too. So if you are doing this, say a bridge, you may need to check with Fisheries and Oceans Canada or Transport Canada or those kinds of things that you would already do anyway, but that's still a requirement. The other piece that I think is really important here too is that, so for cottage owners, for example, who are working along a shoreline, often those shorelines are dedicated lands, such as municipal or environmental reserves. It's our requirement that they obtain RM approval before they start that work. So typically under the normal permitting process, we'll require written permission from the RM for that client to undertake that work. However, with the EPP, we're not requiring that they submit it to us, but it's still a requirement that they obtain it. So we just want to make it clear to you that if this is a requirement, or if you need to issue a development permit or anything for those types of activities, that's still required. It's just that we're not obtaining it from the client first or facilitating that first, but it's still their requirement to go to you. And all other RM bylaws and development requirements still apply to this. So lastly, I just wanted to mention that we are here to provide guidance. We have a very dedicated team of aquatic habitat protection specialists around the province that know these lakes and rivers and RMs very well, and we're here to help and provide guidance, whether it's through the process or helping you understand permit conditions or how to best mitigate work. Again, we'd like to make sure that the work is done in the best way possible. So we're here to provide that guidance to you. That wraps up our presentations. I just wanted to provide our client service number here. This is the best way to get a hold of Leah, Krystal, or me, or any of our staff in our programs. Our client service team is always here, dedicated to help, and if they can't provide the information, they will certainly get you in touch with somebody from our program staff who can. So I want to thank you for your attention. We hope that this was helpful today and provided you a little bit of information that you can take forward and share with your councils and your ratepayers as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Leah, Krystal, and Adam, for your presentations. We do still have a few minutes left here, so if anyone does have any questions for today's presenters on any of the material that was covered, please let us know through the chat, and we'll get those answers to you. Just looking here, we do have one question, and it is, in what situations would a rural municipality need a drainage approval?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Adam. I'll take this one. So there's a few different situations, and I kind of spoke to them at a high level in the presentation, but if an RM is working on, say, a new road construction and the natural water flow would cross through that road, they would typically put a culvert where that natural flow should go. If for some reason they want to divert that flow, so maybe they want to move it down the road a little bit, have bigger culverts there, and the water would flow down the right of way to get there, that would be considered a diversion, and so that would need a drainage approval. Similarly, say they're constructing a gravel pit or something. If they're needing to divert water from the natural flow, we would treat that the RM just like any other landowner and require drainage approval there. And those are the most common ones. The rest of the time, we would see that the RM would play more of a participant role in a project where other landowners are using that RM infrastructure.
Great, thanks for that additional information, Krystal. We do have another question here. Why did WSA implement the new ag water stewardship policy?
Yeah, sure. There's a number of reasons. So I talked about some of them in that, if our role at WSA is to kind of think about that cumulative impact of drainage. And we know that drainage is incredibly important, but it has to be done responsibly. And a responsible approach is ensuring that some wetlands stay in the landscape so we can look at that total flow from all the drainage that's happening. And so the main driver for the policy is ensuring that wetlands stay on the landscape. But we know that our producers are doing a really great job of that as it stands right now. We did an inventory of Saskatchewan wetlands and found that 86% of Saskatchewan wetlands are still intact today, which is a great story, and we want to see that continue. And so this policy sets a baseline for what wetlands will stay forever. That also helps us provide some additional protection for landowners in the province from a few different angles. One is that the federal government's really interested in this area of wetlands, and they have looked at different ways that they could perhaps step in and add some regulations around wetlands. We want to hold that pen in Saskatchewan, and so we filled in some of those holes. And also our provincial auditor, who's taken a look at our regulatory program, noted that we need to have some stronger protection for wetlands to manage those water quality objectives. So hit quite a few birds with a stone here, and it's an important policy and an important piece of our regulatory program.
Great, thanks, Krystal. Again, if anyone has any questions, please just let us know in the chat or the Q&A, and we will get to those. There is one more question here. What are some other water sources for irrigation in the province?
Ooh, great question. I'll take that one. We have a number of different sources of water for irrigation in the province. And I'll just kind of high level give some examples. But we have kind of natural reservoirs that can be used. So North Sask River, for example, we're seeing some development right out of some of the rivers there. But we're also seeing some individuals look at opportunistic, we're calling it opportunistic irrigation out of different reservoirs and storage sloughs, whatnot, on their own properties as well. So actually Krystal's group and my team here are working on some of those opportunities as it might, drainage coming in, being stored, and then used for irrigation. So there's some really neat things happening, ingenious things happening with producers on the ground. When it comes to other expansion opportunities, since 2022, we've looked at over 18 different areas for potential group irrigation projects. So we're working on a few of those right now. And so the North Sask was one of them where we're looking at different areas, different opportunities around Lake Diefenbaker itself, looking at opportunities in the Southwest, did some engagement there and just updating some of the science and re-looking at some of the numbers and whatnot. In the Southeast, we've done some work as well, the Cookson, Boundary, Grant Divine reservoirs. So there's a number to put it in perspective. But what I would just add is that if anyone has any particular interest, we are open to supporting expansion projects. And so reach out and we will help anyone through or give the information, because we do have a lot of information on different water sources in the province.
Great, thanks so much, Leah. We do just have one more minute here. There is one more question that we'll cover, and then we'll end it there. There's a question here that says, is there a cost to obtain an AHPP or EPP? Adam, I think that one's for you.
Yeah, no, there is no cost for either of them. We just want people to get the permit or get the EPP and make sure they follow it, so that we have the best outcomes on the landscape that we can possibly have. There is information on both of them on our website, so certainly go there and have a look. Again, you can contact us or whether it's through client service or one of our specialists directly, and they'll happily send the information to you.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to also include that client service contact information on our follow-up email. Thanks, Adam. So with it being 11, I guess we'll end the session here. Thank you to Leah, Krystal, and Adam for taking the time to provide your presentation to our members today. You covered a lot of really great information that I'm sure our members found super helpful. And thank you to all our participants who attended today's webinar. As a reminder, please watch out for an email in the coming days with a link to the webinar recording, as well as a copy of the slideshow presentation. And with that, have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.